The polished brass door handle of Le Meridien felt unnaturally cold under Min-Jun's fingertips, a stark contrast to the flush of humiliation burning his cheeks. Inside, the low hum of privileged conversation and the delicate clink of crystal glasses painted a picture of exclusion. Mr. Harrington, the manager whose perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the disdain in his eyes, blocked the entrance, his voice a carefully modulated dismissal. "I'm afraid we require jackets tonight, young man. Strict policy." His gaze swept over Min-Jun's crisp, dark turtleneck and perfectly fitting trousers, attire easily matching the casually elegant patrons inside. It lingered, however, on Min-Jun's face. Min-Jun kept his voice steady, though his knuckles whitened on the strap of his worn messenger bag, incongruous against the opulence. "Your website states smart casual is acceptable after 8 p.m. It's 8:15. Harrington offered a thin, humorless smile. "Our interpretation of smart casual leans towards the traditional. Perhaps another establishment would be more accommodating." The unspoken word hung heavy in the air, appropriate. Behind him, Mrs. Kensington, a regular whose perfume preceded her like a declaration of wealth, paused mid-sentence, her gaze sharp and assessing as it flickered over Min-Jun. Min-Jun met Harrington's eyes, the polite mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal the steel beneath. He didn't argue. He simply nodded once, a curt, final motion. "I see. Thank you for your time, Mr. Harrington." He turned, the weight of condescending stares prickling between his shoulder blades, the laughter of a group near the door sharpening into focus as he walked away into the chilly evening. The messenger bag, holding the coding project he'd planned to celebrate landing, felt like an anchor. 6 weeks later, the air inside Le Meridien now crackled with a different kind of tension. Gone was the hushed reverence. It was replaced by a brittle silence punctuated by the overly loud scraping of chairs and the pointed clatter of cutlery from the handful of occupied tables. Min-Jun sat at what used to be Harrington's imposing desk in the manager's office, now stripped of its ostentatious ornaments. Spread before him were not menus, but spreadsheets glowing on his laptop and a thick stack of financial records. The faint scent of expensive cleaning products couldn't mask the underlying aroma of anxiety clinging to the staff. A soft knock. Elena, the head server who had once discreetly rolled her eyes at Harrington's snobbery, peered in. Her usual composure was frayed. "Mr. Park? Table 7 is complaining. Again. About the atmosphere." She made air quotes, her voice tight. Min-Jun didn't look up immediately, his finger tracing a line on a bank statement. The Dover sole was cooked perfectly. The wine is the same vintage they always ordered. "What's wrong with the atmosphere, Elena?" She stepped fully inside, closing the door. "They say it feels different. Uncomfortable." Mrs. Kensington told Marco the lighting is unflattering now. She lowered her voice. "They're talking, sir. Loudly. About how the place has lost its class since you took over. They're calling it the boycott." Min-Jun finally looked up. His youthful face was set, the softness replaced by a focused intensity. He'd expected resistance, but the organized, venomous pushback spearheaded by Mrs. Kensington was more potent than he'd anticipated. Reservations had plummeted. Negative, anonymous reviews flooded online platforms, all echoing the same themes about declining standards and a change in clientele. Whispers among the remaining staff suggested some were being actively courted by rival restaurants. "It's not about the lighting, Elena," Min-Jun stated flatly. "Or the Dover sole." He pushed the bank statement towards her. "Look at this. Payments flagged here to a shell company called Aurora Holdings. Substantial payments, monthly, for consulting services. But there's no contract, no invoices in our files. Harrington signed off on every one." Elena's eyes widened. That's a lot of money. Where did it go?" "That," Min-Jun said, leaning back, the worn leather chair groaning, "is the multi-million-dollar question. Harrington vanished the day after I fired him. Cleaned out his desk, left no forwarding address. But this money trail, it started 3 years ago." He tapped the screen. "It smells like embezzlement. Or blackmail. Or something worse." Before Elena could respond, a commotion erupted from the dining room. Raised voices, the distinct sound of glass shattering. Min-Jun was out of his chair and through the door in an instant. At table 3, Marco stood frozen, a look of shock on his face. A shattered water glass lay on the floor. Standing over him was Robert Kensington, Mrs. Kensington's son, his face flushed with either anger or expensive wine. Robert's date looked mortified. "You clumsy oaf," Robert snarled, ignoring the water soaking the cuff of his ridiculously expensive shirt. "This is pure silk. Do you have any idea what it costs?" Marco stammered an apology, bending to pick up the shards. "I'm so sorry, sir, it slipped." "It slipped?" Robert scoffed loudly, drawing every eye in the near-empty room. "Or were you too busy gawking? Standards have certainly plummeted since they started hiring anyone." His gaze swept dismissively over Marco, then deliberately landed on Min-Jun, who had stopped a few feet away. The challenge was clear. Min-Jun felt the heat rise in his neck, but his voice, when he spoke, was dangerously calm. "Mr. Kensington, accidents happen. Marco is one of our most experienced staff. We will, of course, cover the cleaning cost of your shirt." Robert turned fully to Min-Jun, a sneer twisting his lips. "Cleaning? This shirt is ruined. Just like this place. You think throwing money around makes you belong here? You think buying this restaurant changes anything?" He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss meant only for Min-Jun. "You're still the kid Harrington rightly kept out. You don't understand how things work. We made this place, and we can break it. Your little victory?" He chuckled darkly. "It's going to cost you everything. Starting with this." He gestured contemptuously around the room. "Enjoy your empty kingdom, Mr. Park." He threw a wad of cash onto the wet tablecloth. "For the shirt. Keep the change. If you can." He stalked out, his date scrambling after him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marco looked devastated. Elena's expression was grim. The few remaining diners quickly averted their eyes, the message clear. The boycott wasn't just passive avoidance. It was active hostility. Min-Jun knelt, ignoring the water soaking into the knee of his trousers, and helped Marco pick up the larger pieces of glass. "It wasn't your fault, Marco," he said quietly, firmly. "Go to the back, get cleaned up. Take 5 minutes." As Marco retreated, near tears, Elena approached. "He's trying to provoke you. They all are." "I know," Min-Jun said, straightening up, his jaw tight. He looked around the beautiful, hostile room. "But they're also scared. Why this vicious? Why the payments to Aurora Holdings? There's more going on than just racism and bruised egos." He met Elena's worried gaze. Harrington didn't just discriminate. He was hiding something big. And Mrs. Kensington and her crowd are terrified I'm going to find it. The following Tuesday was worse. A critical food delivery failed to arrive, the suppliers citing a mix-up with their order system. The sommelier called in sick with sudden food poisoning after tasting a newly delivered, supposedly premium, bottle of wine that tasted suspiciously like vinegar. Min-Jun spent the morning on the phone, scrambling for alternatives, his frustration mounting with every dead-end and overly apologetic vendor. In the late afternoon, a registered letter arrived. From the City Health Department. An anonymous complaint had been filed, alleging serious sanitation violations at Le Meridien. An inspection was scheduled for first thing tomorrow morning. Min-Jun's blood ran cold. A failing grade, especially one orchestrated, could shut him down before he even got started. He immediately called his newly hired, pragmatic lawyer, Anya Sharma. "Anonymous complaints are common weapons, Min-Jun," Anya said, her voice crisp over the speakerphone. "Especially against new owners. It reeks of Kensington's tactics. We'll be ready for the inspectors, dot every I, cross every T. But it's a distraction. Have you made any progress on the financials?" Min-Jun rubbed his temples. "Some. The Aurora Holdings payments trace back to a holding company registered offshore. Untouchable. But I found something else, discrepancies in the liquor inventory purchased versus sold over the past 2 years. Significant discrepancies. Enough high-end wine and spirits missing to stock a small bar. Harrington was either running a side business or someone was siphoning it off and paying Harrington to look the other way via Aurora," Anya finished. "Plausible. But who? Kensington? She certainly has the cellar for it. And the spite," Min-Jun added grimly. "But proving it." A knock interrupted them. Chef Laurent stood in the doorway. A towering figure with a fiery reputation and forearms like knotted rope. He'd been the only senior staff member who hadn't immediately handed in his notice when Min-Jun took over. He'd also been conspicuously silent, observing. Mr. Park, Laurent rumbled, his French accent thick. A word. Min-Jun nodded to Anya. I'll call you back. He muted the phone. Laurent stepped in, closing the door firmly. He didn't sit. He looked directly at Min-Jun, his gaze surprisingly intense, lacking the usual professional distance. The boycott, the missing delivery, the sabotaged wine, the health inspection. He listed them off like ingredients for a disaster. You are under attack. I'm aware, chef, Min-Jun replied, keeping his tone neutral. Laurent leaned forward, resting his massive hands on the desk. Harrington was a snake, but he was a careful snake. He kept records, secret records. He distrusted everyone, especially the Kensingtons. He knew things that could ruin people. Min-Jun's pulse quickened. What kind of things? Things about where the missing wine really went, Laurent said, his voice dropping. Things about Aurora Holdings. Things about certain private gatherings held in the private dining room after hours. Gatherings with very influential guests and activities that would not look good in the newspapers. Min-Jun stared at him. You knew about this? I suspected, Laurent corrected sharply. Harrington liked to boast, to imply he had power over his betters. But he was also paranoid. He kept proof. He told me once, drunk on stolen cognac, that his insurance was hidden where only he could find it. In plain sight, he said. Somewhere in this building that belonged to him, body and soul. Laurent's lip curled in disgust. He believed this place was his fiefdom. Did he say where? Min-Jun pressed, leaning forward. Laurent shook his head. No, but he was obsessed with the history of the building. Spent hours in the old cellar, poking around the original foundations before it was renovated into wine storage. He straightened up. I tell you this because... He hesitated, a flicker of something like shame crossing his face. Because I stood by while he turned away people like you. Because I needed the job. But this... He gestured vaguely towards the dining room, implying the boycott, the sabotage. This is not about fine dining. This is ugly. And you. He looked at Min-Jun, a grudging respect in his eyes. You fired the snake. Now you are fighting the nest. If you find Harrington's insurance, you might break them. But be warned, Mr. Park. These people, they do not fight fair. They will destroy you if they can. After Laurent left, Min-Jun sat in the sudden silence, the lawyers still muted on the phone. The stakes had just exploded. It wasn't just about saving his restaurant anymore, or even exposing embezzlement. Harrington had been sitting on potential blackmail material involving the city's elite, material someone, likely connected to the Kensingtons and Aurora Holdings, was desperate to keep hidden. The boycott, the sabotage, the health inspection, they weren't just petty revenge. They were a scorched earth campaign to bury those secrets by burying him. Min-Jun unmuted the phone. Anya? Change of plan. We need to find something before tomorrow's inspection. And I need access to the original cellar foundations. Tonight. He looked out the window at the gathering dusk. The quiet teenager bard at the door was gone. In his place stood an owner with a restaurant under siege and a hidden weapon potentially buried within its walls. The fight for Le Meridien had just become a fight for survival, and the most dangerous players were still hidden in the shadows, watching, waiting for him to make a fatal mistake. The game was far from over. It was entering its most treacherous phase. The silence in the cellar was absolute, thick with the damp chill of centuries-old stone and the oppressive weight of secrets. Min-Jun's flashlight beam cut a narrow path through the profound darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and the rough-hewn walls of the original foundations. Elena followed close behind, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air, clutching her own light like a lifeline. Laurent said in plain sight. Min-Jun murmured, his voice echoing slightly in the vast, low-ceilinged space. He swept his light over stacked crates of vintage wine Harrington had likely never accounted for, over dusty racks holding forgotten cleaning supplies, over the massive, modern HVAC unit humming in the corner. Where does a man like Harrington hide something he considers insurance? Somewhere he felt powerful, Elena suggested, her light joining his to scan the intricate brickwork near the original coal chute, long since bricked over. Somewhere only he went. He used to come down here alone, sometimes for hours. Said it helped him think. She shivered, not just from the cold. Min-Jun moved methodically, tapping sections of wall, testing the solidity of stones, examining the heavy wooden beams overhead. His fingers traced the mortar, gritty and cold. Near the back wall, partially obscured by stacked pallets of mineral water, his light caught something different. A section of the wall seemed newer. The stones were slightly smaller, the mortar a fraction lighter. He shoved the heavy pallets aside with surprising strength born of adrenaline, ignoring Elena's startled gasp. Here, he breathed. He ran his fingers over the suspect patch. It was about 2 feet square. He pressed. Nothing. He pushed. Still solid. Frustration gnawed at him. Time was bleeding away. The health inspectors would arrive at dawn. He stepped back, aiming his light lower. At the base of the wall, almost hidden by accumulated grime, was a single, slightly loose stone. Not part of the patch, but adjacent to it. He crouched, pulling his jacket sleeve over his hand to wipe away the dirt. The stone wiggled. With a grunt, he pried it free. Behind it wasn't earth, but a small, dark cavity. And inside the cavity, tarnished but unmistakable, was an old-fashioned key. Elena gasped. A key? To what? Min-Jun held it up in his beam. It was heavy, brass, intricately cut. Not a door in this cellar, that's for sure. His mind raced, connecting Lawrence's words. Asterisk obsessed with the history. Original foundations. Asterisk his beam lifted, tracing the lines of the walls upward. The building, the original structure. Harrington bragged about belonging to it. What if he found something in it? He scanned the walls again, his light lingering on the patch of newer stone. It wasn't just a patch, it was a deliberate concealment. He pressed the edges, feeling for a seam. Nothing. He pushed the key into the mortar joints around the patch, probing. On the left side, about halfway up, the key slid into a narrow crack with a faint click. He turned it. Nothing happened. He tried the other direction. A soft, grinding sound emanated from within the wall. The entire patch of newer stone suddenly pivoted inward on unseen hinges, revealing a dark, narrow opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through. Son of a, Elena breathed. A wave of stale, dry air, smelling of old paper and dust, washed over them. Min-Jun shone his light into the gap. It revealed a cramped, hidden chamber, perhaps part of the original building structure, sealed off during renovations. And inside, illuminated in the stark beam, was a small, fireproof safe, bolted to the stone floor. Min-Jun's heart hammered against his ribs. Insurance. He squeezed through the opening, Elena close behind, her light adding to the illumination. The safe looked old but sturdy. There was no keyhole, only a combination dial. Numbers, Min-Jun muttered, pulling out his phone. He snapped pictures of the safe, the hidden chamber, the key. He wouldn't use random numbers. Something personal. Something tied to this place, or his power here. He racked his brain, recalling snippets from the financial records, dates of large Aurora payments, Harrington's start date, Meridian's founding date. He tried the restaurant's founding year. Nothing. He tried the date of the first Aurora payment. The dial clicked, but the handle didn't budge. Frustration mounted. Time was their enemy. He tried Harrington's known birth year. Still locked. Elena shone her light around the tiny chamber. Min-Jun, she whispered, pointing her beam at the wall beside the safe. Scratched faintly into the stone, almost invisible, were 4 numbers. 1923. The year the original building was completed, Min-Jun realized. He dialed the numbers slowly. 1-9-2-3. A solid clunk echoed in the small space. He grasped the handle. It turned smoothly. Inside the safe, there were no stacks of cash, no glittering jewels. Instead, there were files. Thick, meticulously organized folders. And a single, sleek external hard drive. Min-Jun pulled out the top folder. The label, typed neatly, sent a jolt through him. Project Aurora. Holdings, payments, and beneficiaries. He flipped it open. Inside were bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, and detailed ledgers tracking millions flowing from Meridien through Aurora Holdings. The beneficiaries listed weren't shell companies, they were names. Familiar names. Kensington, Aldrich, Vance, pillars of the city's elite. Payments coincided suspiciously with key city council votes on zoning variances that benefited their developments, with overlooked building code violations on their properties. The next folder was labeled Private Events, Guest Lists and Activities. Min-Jun opened it to find detailed logs. Dates, times, names. Not just Mrs. Kensington, but her husband, Robert, city officials, judges. The activities listed were chillingly vague but damning. Confidential discussion, city contract B, celebration, resolution passed, special entertainment provided. Photographs were paper-clipped to some entries, grainy, but clear enough. Handshakes over envelopes, officials in compromising positions with people who were definitely not their spouses. Robert Kensington snorting lines off a mirrored table in the private dining room. The hard drive, Min-Jun suspected, held digital copies and likely more, videos, audio recordings, emails. He wasn't just skimming wine. Elena breathed, her face pale in the flashlight glow. He was running a blackmail operation, a brokerage for corruption. They were his clients. Aurora was the laundering front. Min-Jun felt a surge of cold fury mixed with vindication. This wasn't just petty racism or resentment over his ownership. This was systemic rot. The Kensingtons and their circle weren't just boycotting. They were fighting to protect their entire illicit ecosystem, a system Harrington had facilitated and documented. His phone buzzed violently in his pocket, shattering the tomb-like silence. It was Marco, sounding frantic. "Mr. Park, you need to get up here now? It's the delivery entrance. Someone dumped something. It's awful." The stench hit them before they even reached the service alley. A sickening, putrid odor of decay. Outside the delivery bay, several large, leaking garbage bags had been dumped. Flies buzzed thickly around them. Min-Jun pulled his shirt collar over his nose as he approached, Elena gagging beside him. Marco stood back, looking green. Just appeared 10 minutes ago," Marco stammered. The driver who found it said it wasn't here when he left for his break. Min-Jun used a broken broom handle to cautiously poke one of the bags. It split open, spilling rancid, maggot-ridden seafood guts and spoiled meat onto the asphalt. The message was unmistakable, a grotesque preview of what the health inspectors would find if they looked hard enough, or if this anonymous dumping was discovered near the kitchen. "They're escalating," Elena said, her voice tight with disgust and fear. "They know we found something. They're trying to bury us literally and figuratively before the inspection." Min-Jun stared at the vile mess, the hidden files burning a hole in his messenger bag. The clock was ticking down to dawn. He had the weapon to destroy them, but wielding it required proof, strategy, and time, luxuries he didn't have. If the health department shut him down tomorrow, even temporarily, the narrative would solidify. The inexperienced Korean kid ran a once great restaurant into the ground through incompetence. The boycott would become permanent. His credibility and his chance to expose them would vanish in the stench of manufactured scandal. "Call a hazardous waste cleanup crew," Min-Jun ordered Marco, his voice steel. "Pay triple for immediate service. Document everything, photos, video of the dumping site before they touch it. Get statements from anyone who saw anything." He turned to Elena. "We need Anya. Now. Tell her we have the files. Tell her about this." He gestured at the filth. "And get Chef Laurent. We have a restaurant to prepare for war." Back in the manager's office, now feeling more like a command bunker, Min-Jun spread the damning folders on the desk. Anya Sharma arrived within 20 minutes, her sharp eyes scanning the contents with growing intensity. Laurent stood by the window, his massive arms crossed, his expression grim but resolute. "This is explosive," Anya stated, tapping a photo of Councilman Vance accepting a thick envelope. "But it's also a powder keg. We can't just drop this publicly yet. The Kensingtons have powerful lawyers, connections everywhere, including likely within the health department itself. They'll tie us up in court for years while they dismantle you and discredit this evidence." "So what do we do?" Min-Jun asked, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. "Let them shut us down tomorrow? Let them win?" "No," Anya said firmly. "We fight the inspection tooth and nail. We document their sabotage, the spoiled wine, the dumped waste, the missing deliveries. We turn the inspection into a platform to demonstrate their malfeasance. We show the inspectors a restaurant operating with impeccable standards despite being targeted. We make them look like the villains trying to crush legitimate business." "And the files?" Laurent rumbled. "We use them strategically," Anya replied, a calculating gleam in her eye. "We don't release them publicly yet. We send copies, anonymously, to each person named in these files, to their homes, with a simple message: Asterisk, the insurance has been claimed. Back off. Now. Asterisk. Min-Jun understood. Fear. It was the currency Harrington traded in, and now it was their turn. So panic among the conspirators. Make them question each other. Make them wonder who else has the files. Make them pressure the Kensingtons to cease fire before their entire world explodes. It's a gamble, Anya conceded. They might call the bluff. They might double down. But it might also make them hesitate, Min-Jun said. Buy us time. Time to pass the inspection. Time to solidify our position. He looked at Laurent. Chef, can your kitchen withstand the most rigorous inspection? Right now? Despite everything. Laurent drew himself up to his full height. My kitchen is spotless, Monsieur Park. It always is. My staff may be nervous, but they are professionals. We will be ready. There was a fierce pride in his voice now, a defiance aimed squarely at the Kensingtons and their ilk. Good, Min-Jun said. Elena, coordinate with Marco and the cleanup. Ensure every inch of the alley and loading bay is pristine before dawn. Anya, prepare the anonymous packages. Use untraceable methods. Laurent, lock down your kitchen. Triple check everything. He took a deep breath, looking at the damning evidence spread before him. We meet the inspectors at the door. We show them nothing but excellence and cooperation. And we let our anonymous friends sweat. As the others moved to carry out their tasks, Min-Jun walked to the large window overlooking the now deserted dining room. The elegant space felt like a battlefield waiting for dawn. He saw his own reflection superimposed on the glass. The teenager bard at the door was gone, replaced by a young man hardened by the fight, his eyes holding a cold fire. He hadn't just bought a restaurant. He'd bought a war. And the opening salvos had been fired. He noticed a figure standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of an awning. A woman, watching the restaurant intently. Even from this distance, her posture radiated tension. She wasn't a regular. She wasn't with the press. As Min-Jun watched, she lifted a phone, took a picture of the front entrance, then turned and melted into the night. A new player? A Kensington operative? Or someone else drawn to the unfolding drama? The stakes had just gotten higher, the web more tangled. He had Harrington's insurance, but the cost of holding it was escalating by the hour. The inspection was a battle. The blackmail packages were a gamble. The mysterious watcher was an unknown. And somewhere out there, Silas Harrington was still missing, a ghost who could reappear at any moment to tip the scales. Min-Jun touched the cold glass. The night was far from over. The fight for Le Meridien, and for justice, was entering its most dangerous phase. The morning sun streamed through the pristine windows of Le Meridien, glinting off polished silver and sparkling glass. But the air hummed with a different kind of energy than the usual pre-service calm. Min-Jun stood near the entrance, flanked by Chef Laurent. They watched as the two health inspectors, Ms. Vance and Mr. Petrovich, meticulously signed their report. Ms. Vance's expression was carefully neutral, but Mr. Petrovich offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Grade A, Ms. Vance announced, her voice clipped. Impeccable standards, Mr. Park. Especially given. She paused, glancing towards the now spotless service alley visible through a side window. Recent challenges. Your documentation of the external sabotage attempt was thorough. Thank you, Min-Jun replied, his voice steady despite the tremor of relief coursing through him. The hazardous waste team had worked through the night. Lawrence Kitchen Brigade had scrubbed every surface twice. Anya's presence had ensured every question was answered with precision. They had won the battle. Barely. As the inspectors left, the tension in the room didn't dissipate. It shifted. Laurent clapped a massive hand on Min-Jun's shoulder. They looked like they swallowed lemons. Especially Vance. Saw her name on one of those photos, didn't she? Anya nodded grimly. Copies were delivered anonymously last night. To every name on Harrington's list, including Councilman Vance. The message was clear. Back off. The timing, right before the inspection, was deliberate. They knew we had it. Elena let out a shaky breath. So, is it over? Before anyone could answer, Robert Kensington stormed through the brass doors, bypassing the host stand entirely. His face was a thundercloud, his expensive suit looking rumpled. He ignored everyone else, striding straight up to Min-Jun, stopping inches away. You, he seethed, his voice low and trembling with rage. You arrogant little prick. You think sending cheap threats scares us. Min-Jun didn't flinch. He met Robert's furious gaze with unnerving calm. Cheap threats? I merely ensured relevant parties were aware certain insurance policies had changed hands to prevent misunderstandings, like anonymous health complaints or dumped garbage. Robert's face flushed crimson. You have no idea what you're playing with. Those files, they're poison. For everyone, including you. You release them, you destroy this city's trust. You destroy yourself. No one will ever dine here again. Is that a prediction, Mr. Kensington? Min-Jun asked softly. Or another threat? Because sabotaging my deliveries, tampering with my wine, and dumping rotting seafood at my door already crossed lines. The health department has that documented now, too. Legally. Robert's fists clenched. You bought your way in here, but you don't belong. You never will. We built this city. We decide who thrives and who. He trailed off, his gaze flickering over Min-Jun's shoulder towards the street. His expression shifted, confusion momentarily replacing rage. Min-Jun followed his gaze. The woman he'd seen watching the restaurant the night before stood across the street again. This time, she wasn't hiding. She was young, early 20s perhaps, dressed in simple, dark clothes, her dark hair pulled back severely. Her eyes, wide and filled with a potent mix of fear and determination, were fixed on Robert Kensington. Robert paled slightly. Sophia, he breathed, the name barely audible. Sophia Harrington. Silas Harrington's daughter. Min-Jun recognized her now from grainy social media photos Anya had dug up. She'd been away at university, distant from her father's world. Robert seemed to recover, his sneer returning, though it looked forced. Come to see the wreck your father left behind? Or to beg for scraps from the new owner? Sophia didn't move. She just kept staring at Robert, her silence more unnerving than any shout. Robert turned back to Min-Jun, trying to reclaim his bluster, but the crack was visible. This isn't finished, Park. He jabbed a finger towards Sophia. And keep her away from me. She's trouble, just like her old man. He spun on his heel and stalked out, the brass door clanging shut behind him with finality. The silence in the restaurant was profound. Laurent muttered a curse in French. Elena looked shaken. Anya's eyes were calculating, fixed on Sophia. Min-Jun stepped outside. Sophia hadn't moved. As he approached, he saw the resemblance to Silas Harrington, the same sharp jawline, the same intense eyes, but devoid of the calculating coldness. Hers held raw pain. Sophia Harrington? Min-Jun asked gently. She flinched but nodded, her gaze finally shifting from the spot where Robert had been to Min-Jun. You're him. The one who fired my father. It wasn't accusatory, it was a statement, laced with exhaustion. I am, Min-Jun confirmed. Min-Jun Park. I know who you are, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I've been watching, reading the news, seeing the boycott. She swallowed hard. Robert Kensington just threatened you. Again, he threatened me. He seems used to getting his way, Min-Jun said carefully. Sophia's hands, clenched at her sides, trembled slightly. He should be scared. They all should. She looked directly at Min-Jun, her eyes pleading. I need to talk to you. Not here. Somewhere quiet. Please. It's about my father. About what he was really doing. About why he ran. Min-Jun studied her face, the genuine fear warring with a desperate need to unburden herself. This wasn't a Kensington plant. This was a scared young woman caught in the same web, perhaps holding a thread that could unravel it all. All right, he said. Come inside. We can talk in the office. As he led Sophia Harrington into Le Meridien, past the watchful eyes of his staff, Min-Jun felt the stakes reconfigure once more. He had survived the boycott's opening salvo, passed the inspection, and rattled the enemy with Harrington's files. But the enemy wasn't just the Kensingtons anymore. Silas Harrington's shadow loomed larger than ever, and his daughter, a potential ally or a dangerous wildcard, had just stepped into the light, carrying secrets that could either save them or sink them all. The fight was far from over. It had simply drawn in a new, vulnerable player, making the next move more critical and more perilous than ever. Moral of the story: true power isn't bought with money or wielded through fear. It's forged in the quiet strength of integrity and the courage to face corruption with unwavering light, proving that the most profound victories belong to those who fight not just for themselves, but for the dignity of every voice silenced by prejudice.